All right, so we're gonna give this a try. Uh, I wanted to make this video earlier, but I've been sick, so you can probably hear my voice being a bit weird. Uh, it's a bit deeper than usual. Um, I'm gonna see how I go. If my voice holds up for 5 games, which is what I want to go over. Um, so this is just going to be a quick recap of the second Bradford Congress, which was on the 3rd and 4th of January in the Latvian Welfare Club in Bradford. Uh, the first Bradford Annual Congress was last year at the same time. Apparently, there used to be an annual tournament and then it kind of went defunct for a while. So this has been started up again as part of the White Rose Chess Circuit, which is a circuit of, at the moment, 6 tournaments being run by Andy Wainwright around Yorkshire. Um, and it's kind of like a Grand Prix sort of idea. So at the end of the circuit, uh, whoever's got the most points gets a special prize. Um, so there's I'm not going to remember them all. It's like Bradford, Harrogate, Leeds, York, Ilkley. Ugh, last one. Okay, I've forgotten the last one. There's 6 of them anyway. Uh, um. So anyway, first of the year. It's not the first of the circuit. We've played Leeds and York so far. Um. Now I remember playing this last year, and it started off. I mean, the tournament itself went quite well for me. Um. Well, the first day went like a dream last year. So I got 3 out of 3. And I was flying high and feeling like I was just going to cruise to victory in the tournament. And then I got beaten by Paul Butterworth in round 4, um, who really completely outplayed me. In So I was black. I played a King's Indian, and yeah, he surprised me by playing it in a kind of a strange way. Um, I played f5, basically standard King's Indian move f5. He played e takes f5, which I was sort of surprised by. Usually, white lets the pawns come forward and attacks on the queen side. And yeah, I mean, I dropped an exchange at some point, but to be honest, I was getting kind of outplayed. I had the feeling I was getting outplayed in that position anyway. And then I drew my last round, I think. Very luckily, I was going to lose that one as well. So it was pretty good last year, but it wasn't a win. Um, so this year, oh yeah, so I was going to say why it was a disaster. The real reason it was a disaster is because it snowed. It had snowed that week, and it was like snow, then it iced over, and I was getting the car out in the morning, and everything went wrong. So I couldn't get properly out. I had to get the neighbor to move their car. I got stuck in the middle of the street on the ice. And the doors had frozen shut. So the driver door froze shut. So I was able to open the passenger door, and then climbing in the passenger door, I whacked my head off the rear view mirror and snapped it entirely off the windscreen. Had to sellotape, like duct tape this back onto the windscreen because like I was definitely going to make it to my chess tournament. And then drove to Bradford, turned down the wrong street. So that there's this large street, and then you've got hills downwards, these little laneways. And the Latvian Welfare Club was down one of these laneways, and I drove down the wrong one and got stuck at the bottom and I couldn't make it back up because of the ice. I was completely stuck on a patch of ice at the bottom. I was there for about 10 minutes, and the round was about to start, and I was considering just abandoning the car. And then these two massive Asian guys came out of this house uh, to the right of me, and one of them got behind the car and started shoving it, and the other one like started pouring water under the wheels, and they got me moving and got me up the hill. And then I anyway, Long story short, I just about made it for the start of round one last year. This year it didn't snow. Everything went really smoothly. Journey was great. So uh, yeah, this was a Danny Gormally style digression, wasn't it? Uh, I may or may not decide to edit this out. So anyway, um, the tournament went very well. I scored 4 out of 5 and took equal first with Sriganti and Jael de Sosa, or give his full name, Jael de Sosa Mwachikape. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, Jael. Um, yeah, went great. Couldn't ask for anything more. In fact, it went better than I probably could have hoped because you're probably going to see in this recap that some of my play was, let's just say, not at the standard that I expect of myself. I don't know what other people expect of me, but yeah, let's just say I got away with some stuff in this tournament. So let's just jump right into a game recap, I think. Um, I guess before I do that, I'll just say the tournament was run really well. I love the venue. If you go on my Instagram, I'll put the link in to my Instagram, and I've got some pictures of the Latvian Welfare Club there. But the room that we play in is upstairs, and it's absolutely gorgeous. There's original oil paintings hanging on the wall. There was a photography exhibition, um, and the tournament is always run really professionally. All of the White Rose Circuit tournaments are run by Andy Wainwright, who is also the chief arbiter, and it's all just great. You know that they go really smoothly. I'm sure he would tell you they don't, but you know, as far as the players are concerned, they do. So he's doing his job really well there. Um, yeah. Okay. Let's jump in. I'm also going to apologize in advance for various sips of tea, sniffles, coughs. I'm going to try not to do too much of that stuff, but like I said, I'm not too well. So, okay. So, yeah, game one was against a player that I've played before, who is actually another late returner to chess like me, and I think is very good. Um, he has a lot of time trouble issues, and I think that's the only reason why his rating is not higher. So currently he's 1900, but I think his standard of play is quite a bit higher than that. He's given me trouble in both of our games anyway. Um, so e6 is already a little bit unusual for me. Up to this point in my career, I've mainly played G6 type systems. Um, when I was younger, I used to play kind of Benko Benoni type systems, and more recently, I've been playing King's Indian. So I would normally go G6 here and play some kind of King's Indian, but I've been trying some different things lately. I want to eventually learn systems like the Nimzo Indian. So for whatever reason, it may or may not have been a good idea, but I played E6 here. Obviously, this gives White the opportunity to go into, uh, main line, kind of offer me the chance to maybe go into Queen's Indian or Benoni. I don't think I'd fully made up my mind what I was going to do at this point. Uh, Obviously, I could also go for a Queen's Gambit declined here, which I'm probably not going to do because I don't think I've ever played the Queen's Gambit declined in my entire life. So yeah, I was making it up as I went along at this point. Uh, so yeah, White played G3, uh, and I went C5. Um, I can't remember what I was thinking, if any. I guess one thing that can happen from these structures, which I would be fairly happy with, is um, White can choose to go into sort of a, well, it would end up a hedgehog basically. So we would get this type of thing, and I'm probably gonna do, your standard kind of hedgehog moves in this position. Uh, I don't mind those. If you're more interested in equality than a complicated game, um, then after c4, I guess you can either go. I guess you can go d5, or I guess you can capture and then play d5. But yeah, I would definitely have gone for a hedgehog type setup. Uh, but that was not the plan. So my opponent goes c3. Um, and, really neither side has anything much here. Like, this is going to be fairly equal. White's intention is to play a slow, solid game, which is that's fine. I usually avoid setups like that, but I've just been deciding I need to learn how to play a bit more calmly. Uh, that's not how most of this tournament goes, by the way. Uh, anyway, I'll skim through some of these moves because I don't think they require massive amounts of explanation. Knight a3 is a bit funny, um, but basically, my opponent explained after the game that his entire concept is a dark square blockade here. He's going to put all his pawns on dark squares. First of all, he's going to get this bishop outside the pawn chain, put all his pawns in dark squares. This knight goes here, and I guess depending on circumstance, it's either going to go b5 or it might go back to c2. So just, I guess, solidity and equality. So knight a3, d5. Yeah, I'm starting to feel a little ambitious. I'm thinking, okay, white doesn't really want the center, so there's no reason for me not to put this pawn in the center. I don't remember if I even considered. So what the engine tells me I should do here is takes, and then to actually take this knight on a3. So this is an interesting moment because when I was, I'm going to say, like, a slightly weaker player, I would have instantly played this move, thinking this is incredible. I'm giving my opponent double isolated pawns, and I probably wouldn't even think about it too much. And then when I became a bit stronger, I started learning that actually you really don't necessarily want to give up the two bishops like this just for nothing, and that those double isolated pawns often don't really signify too much. Often white will be easily able to get rid of one of them by advancing it, and that it's much more important, not to create these dark squared weaknesses. But in this case, the engine says it's the best line. So, yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. That's just, maybe someone else can explain to me why it's good in this position and bad in some others. So I played. Actually, there was plenty of opportunity to play this for several moves here. So we go d5, castles, bishop e7. Interestingly, here the engine no longer thinks that the best idea is the capture. So the inclusion of d5 and castles now changes the picture as far as the engine is concerned. I don't know. I don't feel able to comment on the positional nuances here. I'm just mainly playing sort of sensible moves. Now, he surprised me here. He chopped straight away on f6. Doesn't even wait for me to play h6. And I thought, this can't be good. But it's actually fine. It's not a mistake. And it has a logical idea. So this whole dark square blockade idea, since he intends to put all his pawns on dark squares, uh, it makes sense. Number one, if you're going to give up one of your bishops, give up the dark squared one. And number two, since you're going to hold the center solid and closed, it means that my two bishops isn't really that much of an advantage. Now, having said all that, the engine does give black a slight advantage here. So we get some more normal moves. This, looking back at how the game went, this was probably not the best idea. I had a specific idea in mind here. So I should probably just develop. I should probably just play Queen C7, Rook C8, sort of normal moves here. My concept here was basically to. I remembered some Korchnoi game where he played Bishop A6, Bishop D3, and then he had a pawn move. I can't remember, was it E4 or C4, coming in supporting the bishop and forcing White to make a concession to get rid of it. So that was my idea. I was going to bishop here, bishop was going to come into this square, and I was going to follow up and support it with C4. So if White played Rook D1, I was going to go Bishop E2, Rook D2, C4 with tempo, Queen there, and then Bishop D3. This was my idea, and I thought, you know, even if he chases it away with Knight E1, I can retreat it here, and then I thought this is going to be a great position for me. My bishop is now outside the light square pawn chain. The engine actually says this plan is not in any way good for me. So, according to the engine, I would actually be much better off not doing any of this stuff and actually just trying to open the position up a little. Probably, advancing this pawn onto c4, even with the bishop outside the pawn chain, is not as good as keeping the tension here. So, this was just, I guess you could call this me not understanding the position. And here, before, when I played bishop a6, I thought now I would have time to play bishop d3. So let's say something like this, and then here. And in fact, White's in a bit of trouble here because he's got queen a4, I go a6, and now he's going to have to move this rook away so he can make an escape square for his queen. So something like, yeah, I was looking at lines like this, but I was looking very superficially. Because right before playing it, I noticed that White would just play this. And I thought this is no good for me. So I thought takes, my bishop's under attack, and the long diagonal has been opened for White's bishop. In fact, the engine says this is totally fine. What are you worried about? Stick your bishop on e4. Knight d6 looks a bit scary, but you're not worried. You just put your bishop on c6, and this is very small advantage black. It also says, instead of taking here right away, just put the bishop on e4 right now. So White has the choice of leaving it there or trading it for one of his best pieces. So as it happens, I should have followed through with my original plan. Yeah, I don't know what to say about this. It's like, it's a weird psychological thing, right? I was planning this, and then before I played it, I noticed that I'd overlooked a move. And so I rejected my original plan without really going into proper calculation of this move that I hadn't considered. I guess this is what you call just poor form, or what I should do is just properly reevaluate here. So anyway, I guess I mini panicked here, and I thought, okay, well, I'm still okay. This is not a bad diagonal for the bishop. I'm not going to be playing bishop d3 right away, so I'm just going to develop. And from this point on, my opponent starts playing very well. In fact, he told me that on this move, so he plays knight b5 here. And after the game, he told me that he calculated everything here from this point until move, I think, 18 or 19. So we're on move 13. So he calculated a quite complicated forced line, 6 or 7 moves deep here, uh, including a key move that I hadn't seen at all. Which makes sense because he was thinking for ages. So, I mentioned at the start that he's a bit of a time trouble addict. And I don't know how far up I was on the clock here, but it was getting to be quite a lot. He thought a long time about knight b5. Um, so all that calculation was costing him. And I guess by being more superficial, I was gaining time on the clock. So there you go. Sometimes it pays not to be so good. Okay, so knight b5 I hadn't been worried about because I thought queen c6, a4, c4. And I thought, what is going on here? White's in deep trouble. Uh, queen b4 is basically forced. And then now I make a significant mistake here. Apparently the right move here is rook a e8. And the reason is because we have the same idea. So the idea is we want a rook on e8 because we want to put a bishop on e7 to harass the white queen. And I thought my move was rook e8. And I couldn't see what white was doing here. But there is a long forced line that's gonna come, and we're gonna see why rook a e8 is much better. And really the reason is because it takes this rook off the long diagonal. So there's going to be quite a few lines here where this is a very significant fact that rook on a8 is still vulnerable on the long diagonal. And this is because I'd completely overlooked my opponent's next move. So rook e8, white is now better by quite a lot, clearly better because of this move. No, this is so strange. Engines and they really mess me up, man. So I mentioned that I hadn't gone through this properly. So apparently after the immediate e4, we're equal again. And what white should do is play knight d2 instead. Wow. Due to almost unstoppable threat of knight takes c4. Because what can I do about it? I can't retreat my queen. Well, retreating to b7, it does nothing anyway. But if I play queen to c8, then we've got this kind of forced line here. And white wins a pawn. And if I take here, a takes b5, retreat the queen, and now e4 is even stronger. Yeah. This is horrible. The engine is giving plus 3.7 here. So this is just losing for me. Wow. So that's knight d2 instead of e4 here. Yeah, neither of us saw this at all. Very interesting. So yeah. Anyway, I had missed e4, and this is what my opponent had spent all that time thinking about. And I straight away play a losing move here. So apparently what I should do, so I had rejected this. So bishop e7, the whole idea is takes here. Now, pawn takes d5 is impossible because of rook takes e7. So this is forced. And then I think my opponent was planning this. Right, so queen takes g2, king takes, bishop takes, knight takes d7. Bishop b7 check. King g1. Bishop e7. Right. So we get this forced line, and we're equal. This doesn't feel like this was that hard to see. I'm not sure. I can't remember why I rejected this. Can't remember. So yeah, another mistake. So bishop e7, best move here. I played losing blunder, d takes e4. But that's because I hadn't seen the best move, and neither of us did. So basically here, it's kind of similar to previous line we looked at with knight d2. Best move for white here, knight d2, and I'm completely busted. This is +3. So after bishop e7, queen takes c4, I'm kind of forced to trade the queens. And I mean, it looks like I'm just going to be a pawn down here for 0 compensation. I mean, less than 0. In fact, white has a huge position here. If I ever move this rook, the a7 pawn is hanging. So I probably have to give this bishop up for this knight. I don't think I can try and hang on to this pawn with f5. I think that just weakens my position even further. So yeah, this is completely horrible. Not played by my opponent. He plays knight e5. So it's a blunderfest. So here we finally stop the string of blunders. Knight takes e5. Best move. D takes e5. Bishop e7. Bishop takes e4. Now here I do make an inaccuracy. So I go queen c8 here. Apparently, best thing to do is this. Now I was thinking that my c pawn was going to be too weak here, but apparently I take, and according to the engine, I do not even try to defend the c pawn. I actually take the open file, and it's equal. Tiny advantage black, but basically equal. I guess the 3 pawns here are not really much use. The open file is very significant. So very drawish though. But would I have played this if I'd seen that? I can't remember. I can't remember what I was thinking. Was I still thinking I might try and win this game or not? I was probably I knowing the way I think about things in games, I was probably thinking if I can just keep it a little bit complicated, I can try and outplay him, especially as he was getting shorter and shorter on time. So that is probably part of what was going through my head. So knight d6, best move. Bishop takes, pawn takes, rook b8. All these moves are fairly self-explanatory. Yeah, queen c5 here was a little bit of a panic move. Although it looks like white is doing really well here, apparently there's nothing much wrong with my position. Apparently I can even take time for things like g6 or h6. I can play queen d7. But I was just starting to get worried about this d pawn. And I thought, if I can get the queens off, and in this change structure, I thought pressure on the b pawn as well as pressure on the d pawn would give me equality, at least, and some counter chances. Turns out this is wrong for, well, specific reasons we'll get to in a bit. So d2, rook b6, rook d1, king f8, king g2. So I go for an idea here. I'm trying to get counterplay, and the only thing I have going for me here is I have a kingside pawn majority, and I have pawns in the center I can push. So I thought that's what I had to do. The engine says that the best move here is this, which is really surprising to me. I'm going a little bit hoarse here, so this video might have to be a two-parter. So very obviously, I probably, if I even looked at this, I would have rejected it because I would have seen that white pushes the d pawn, and I'm forced to go back. But this is apparently a significant concession on white's part because I can tuck my king in here, and I'm now in no danger. So apparently, the pawn is much better on d6 than it is on d7, which is why this is a good move. Anyway, so I started pushing pawns. And apparently this is, again, a losing blunder. So the idea, obviously, is push the pawn, cut the uh, cut the bishop out of the game, and try and get my own bishop back on the long diagonal. But the I guess the problem here is the weakening of the square d5. So in a couple of moves, white is going to get his rook in here, and my weak pawns are going to start falling. So bishop e2, bit inaccurate. Apparently he should kick my rook with a5. A lot of this was now happening in time trouble, so I think we can go through it fairly quickly. 7. Yeah, so the rook, he's missed his moment to come in with advantage now. Apparently he can still keep advantage by, again, kicking my rook with a5, forcing me back, and then coming in with his rook. There, king there. So some trading happens. And now his rook ends up hanging in a funny spot on a5. And sadly, that's all I've got recorded. So my opponent was down to increment at this point, and I went under 5 minutes. You know, and I usually keep recording down to about 2 or 3 minutes, so I was probably down to about 2 or 3 minutes here. I do remember that eventually we got to a position where his king came up the board a bit. He won a couple of pawns, but I was starting to generate some mating threats to his king in the middle of the board. It was probably still drawish, and then he flagged. That's how games are won, isn't it? So, yeah, I quite a lot of mistakes. Quite a tense game. A bit nervy, really, by me. I think in some positions in that game, I made poor decisions because I thought I was doing worse than I was, and I definitely didn't calculate too well. Um, yeah, not sure what else to say about that one. Um, it was a tough fight though. Uh, yeah, good game. Good game. Not perfect, but you know, the one thing about the time controls in these White Rose Circuit uh, tournaments, it's I think it's 80 plus 10, so 80 minutes for all moves with a 10-second increment. And it's crazy because it sounds like a lot, you know, that's like an hour and 20 minutes each, but that time goes really fast, you know. It feels like you get time for two, three, you know, really good thinks in a game like that, and everything else you kind of have to play at a decent clip. Um, it feels like just sort of slow rapid. So time is a very important factor, and uh, yeah, played a part in a lot of my games in this tournament. Okay, so um, I was playing someone in game two that I'd never played before, and we were both familiar with the opening. So this is this kind of a, I think you call it an Azeri Sicilian. Um, I picked this up uh, I needed a change in my white repertoire against the Sicilian. I used to play Grand Prix Attack and Alpen, so I started playing this more recently. It's pretty good, um, but my opponent chooses one of the best lines against it, which is a fairly reliable way for black to get equality. So, if you were going to give anyone advice in this position here, it would be uh, that taking the bishop is not that great. It's not terrible, but definitely white has a lot more chances for a decent advantage after this. So my opponent plays e6, castles, a6, bishop d3. This is the best square for the bishop in this line. And then, yeah, this is just quite a solid conservative way of playing the opening. Um, if black doesn't do this, then the plan is going to be to take and then play the knight to e2 and try to combine pressure on this d4 pawn with, you know, also, ideas of pushing these pawns. And uh, yeah, it's just a different kind of game. It's perfectly fine for black, actually. Um, but knight c6 is very solid. And then this move looks spectacular, but it's not that difficult to deal with. The main idea is that if black takes, take, and we're going to win our piece back, and we will have slightly damaged black's structure. So the whole point is if black, say, plays knight b8 or anywhere he moves the knight, we're going to get rook check, and whatever he blocks with, whether it's knight or bishop, we're going to follow up with d6. We're going to get our piece back, and we will have a slight advantage there. So it's best not to take it. So he plays d6, after which he is now threatening to take the knight. So we drop it back here. And it's very useful here. So from here, this knight covers a lot of useful squares. Also, the fact that we've got it out of the way, although we've wasted a lot of time to do it, black has also wasted quite a lot of time at this knight. And we've now gained the possibility of putting our bishop on this nice diagonal. We can also go into kind of Spanish looking structures. We've got the plan of c3, bishop c2, and d4. And we'll be playing a weird kind of Spanish where we have our knight on e3. I had a game like this against Joe Varley in Hull in 2024, which, although I ended up losing that game, it wasn't the result of the opening. I got a really good position out of this line. So here we go, g6, c3. So this is the kind of Spanishy type position. e5, which is fine. Actually, the engine thinks this is the best move. I was a little bit surprised because it doesn't seem necessary for black to play this, since I'm going to get d4 in anyway. But like, I think this is perfectly fine, and in fact, it does make it very similar to a Spanish. It's going to start to look a bit like a Chigoran Spanish. I was a little surprised by knight f6, but again, the engine is totally fine with this. I was only surprised because I expected him to continue to try to stop me from playing d4. So I was expecting knight e7. And not 100% sure what I would have played here. This is probably really sensible. The engine suggests this, which looks really radical. What is going on here? So b4, he takes b4, a3. If he plays this, engines are so funny, man. Like, look at this. I've given up a pawn and broken up my pawn structure, and white is better here. I mean, I guess he's got weakened light squares. Yeah, crazy. So that's an engine idea here. Yeah, other ideas are just to play it kind of slow style with d3. Just play a slow kind of Spanish type game. Anyway, so that's not what my opponent did. He played knight f6, and I jumped in with d4, and I was feeling pretty good here. Still equal. Castles, and now castling I thought was a mistake, and the engine agrees with me. And if you were watching uh, one of my previous videos, so I did a video on symmetrical pawn structures and key squares, and I had a game where I was black and I went in for this kind of King's Indian style position uh, and offered my opponent the chance to close the center with d5. But the difference with a traditional King's Indian was that my opponent hadn't played c4, his pawn was still on c3. And in the analysis, I said that this was actually a huge difference, and that the fact that my opponent be able to plant a knight on c4 gave him an advantage. So I was thinking about that game, and I thought, well, I have to play d5 here. And I don't usually like closing things up and gaining space. It's kind of not really my style as white. But here, since I just knew for sure that this was an advantageous position, I just had to do it. So castles, d5, knight e7, a4, and basically the whole concept is this knight goes to c4 and white is much better. So my opponent plays the best line. He can't let me get a complete grip on the queen side. You know, he has to prevent a5, which will make the knight c4 even stronger. e6, knight c4. Apparently this is a slight mistake. Apparently I should go b4 straight away here. Knight c4, rook b8, and I go b4 on the second move. I wonder why it's a mistake. So if I go b4 right away, and if he goes rook b8, I take, and I'm much better here. But the way I play it, b4, right, so here he's got the chance to play b5 straight away. And I guess we go takes, knight a5, c4. Yeah. So this is not so good for me. It's still okay, but I've lost my advantage here. And so, yeah, that's why I should play b4 before playing knight c4, apparently. Interesting. So he doesn't take his chance. So he plays pure King's Indian style. He's going to play for the f5 pawn break, which totally makes sense. Again, I should take on c5 right away here. I play bishop e3. So I'm again giving them the chance to play this b5 break, which he doesn't take. So he must have thought he wants to keep my knight out of a5. He plays h6. I play h3, miss my chance again. So here, b takes, and knight f d2, f5, f3. I was afraid of things like this because I play the King's Indian myself. I feel a bit kind of superstitious about allowing this kind of attack, but the engine is saying plus 2.6 here, as in black has absolutely nothing and white is winning. So I guess in this position, white just has way too much on the queen side. So we're going to be coming in on the b file much too quickly for black to really develop any kind of kingside attack. So that's a useful lesson. So I play it too slowly. I play h3, which is a completely meaningless move. I'm so annoyed with myself. Some of these moves I see, like what is that about? Like, Why should I be worrying about him playing bishop g4? I don't know. I don't really know what I'm thinking there. If he ever plays bishop g4, then I just kick it, and I want him to take here. Like in the King's Indian, this is Black's best attacking piece sometimes. Like I want him to give that up. Why would I prevent that move? Also, playing h3 means that playing f3 is going to be terrible in future. So I can't reach that really nice setup. I can't play f3 in response to f5. Yeah, just a really poor move. So obviously he plays f5. Now, White's still better here. I haven't completely messed this up yet, but just wait a couple of moves. So finally I take on c5. B takes c5. Now, find the apparently winning. Well, actually, I can't do any find the move quizzes here because I've already got the move marked out on the board. So, no suspense. I played bishop takes c5 here, which is a massive blunder. And just like a one move tactical oversight. So, this is the kind of form I was in for some of the games in this tournament. I can't really explain it. I was just overlooking moves. So basically, I thought I was winning here. What I was expecting, obviously, pawn takes bishop, d6, knight c6, queen d5 check, queen takes c6, and I'm winning here. But Black doesn't have to do that. He very quickly played queen c7, and I was like, oh, for God's sake. So now I have to do my poker face and pretend that this is exactly what is intended. So quite quickly played the only move that I thought would give me some kind of reasonable compensation. Um, so I can get out of this with 2 pawns for the piece. So it's not necessarily completely losing yet. The engine says at the moment it's minus 1.1. So clear advantage for Black, but it's going to remain complicated, and I'm not necessarily just going to lose from this point. So I played knight takes d6, and here he should just play knight takes d6, and I play bishop a3, sorry. And basically my plan will be to kind of try and get these central pawns moving. The main problem is that in the meantime, he's going to play this kind of move, and I'm having to, things are just going to get a bit sharp and messy in the center here. The engine suggests e3 here. This also looks fairly obvious. So I have to take, and then maybe rook d8. And I'm gonna fight here. I do have these nice pawns, and my bishops are strong, but he does have an extra piece. I don't have enough compensation here. Instead, he played queen takes c5, which he said afterwards was just also pure miscalculation on his part. So now I get my piece back. I'm showing you quality chess here, right? This is best quality chess on YouTube. So at the moment, I'm counting my lucky stars. D6, bishop e6. Now I even have an advantage, apparently. b1. Now, according to the engine, white is now winning. Having been close to lost, I'm now believe it or not, this position is +3. Now, I know that I temporarily have an extra pawn here, but that guy is so weak. And black has the 2 bishops. And I can tell you during the game, there is no way that I thought that I was +3 here. I felt that I had like a certain amount of advantage. I felt I was certainly going to try and win the game. Uh, but I didn't calculate the right lines. So let's have a look what the engine says we should play here. So there's only one good move here. Basically, we've got to take, and then let's say takes. Now this is obviously what I missed here. So we are now supposed to take on e5, and the point is bishop takes e5. We need to. So the bishops are hanging on the e file. Queen takes c3, takes, takes, takes. And I guess the point here is that black also loses the f pawn and is 2 pawns down in the endgame. So that's simple enough, right? Yeah. Let's have a look. Let's have another look at that. It seems so simple when you see it on the board that you just ask yourself, why did I not calculate this during the game? Because I don't think I was in time trouble here or anything. So pawn takes. Pawn takes. So first of all, you just have to see this knight takes e5 concept. Once you see it, it's probably not hard to calculate that we're just winning at least 1 pawn. And we're already a pawn up. So what if he takes with the bishop? Have a look. Bishop takes, pawn takes. And we have a couple of decent lines here. Again, I can't, it's hard to believe it's +3, but apparently knight h4 here. And apparently there's very little he can do here. So rook f7, queen b3. Yeah, apparently our pieces are so dominant here. This is +3.5. White is totally winning here. I suppose we're threatening to take on f5. We're already a pawn up. And his king is not safe. There you go. It's an easy game when you know how. So what did I play? I played knight h4 straight away. And yeah, this is just not good. I end up losing tons of time with my knight here and allowing his pieces to get very active, all to win a pawn. So yeah, I allow him to play this move. So that's the difference. Basically, I need to take here and open the position up. And the way I play it, this move is very strong. Later in the game, this f3 push becomes very significant. So yeah, I've totally let him back into the game here. Knight takes g6, queen takes c3. Knight comes back, because what else is he going to do? Yeah. Yeah, now here, this is actually the best line according to the engine as well. My opponent offers a repetition. And I'd overlook this completely. This rook b7 move is very good. So, point is, this is obviously no good for me. So the best I can hope for here is perpetual. So I can't take that rook. And if I can't take the rook, I have a problem. Because I'm also tied to the defense of this bishop. So I can't go to a1. Can't go to a2. And if I do this, which is what I did in the game, so if we go through a couple of positions here, so the problem is now this you know, is actually now very risky for me. And I did play this rather than accept the repetition because I was still hoping, I was still a pawn up, and I was kind of hoping that I might be able to hang on to something here. But now my pieces get a little tied up and my coordination goes. So rook e2 is forced. King e7, not the most accurate. Bishop f6 right away is better. Queen b1, apparently losing blunder. Allowing this. Now I thought that I would have rook e1 here because my bishop is no longer hanging because his queen and rook battery has been interrupted. Oh, look at that. I'd overlooked this move. Look at that. I can't take it because a queen takes e1 check and therefore gains tempo on my queen and wins this bishop. Yeah. Yeah, we both overlooked that. So he played bishop f6. Knight f3, another mistake. So apparently I should be going here. So it looks like I'm able to just about hang on to equality with this. Hard to calculate, but apparently I just about generate enough threats on his king and his pieces that I don't lose over here. Didn't see that. So knight f3, and my opponent insta moves bishop takes h3, which is his whole idea, but is apparently not the best move. So here actually rook g7 right away is even stronger, and I'm in quite a bit of trouble. So here I'm kind of forced to go bishop d3, and now he should play this, and I'm forced to do this, and he's doing great. But this kind of transposes anyway. So knight f3, bishop takes h3. Now apparently I missed the best move here. I should play queen b3. I played bishop d3, and now he retreats the bishop. So as a couple of spectators after the game pointed out, that rook g7 here looked very strong. So again, this is the previous line we looked at. I have to play knight e1, and this looks instantly winning, but it isn't. So rook e3, this looks horrible, right? This looks horrible, but this is equality. Apparently black can't generate any more dangerous threats against my king here, and the f3 pawn is hanging, so I'm actually doing okay here. So this is all zeros. So yeah, I would have survived if he'd played rook g7. But he played bishop d7, which is more conservative. Bring the bishop back, keep it out of danger, target this a pawn. So this kind of forces a bit of a liquidation. I don't want to leave him with a passed a pawn, as I don't want to risk losing here. So take. We get some trades, and here's just a dead draw. So we played a few more moves. He did offer me a draw. I still had a vague hope here that he might mess up and allow me to get an ending. Basically, if I can trade the light squared bishops here, then the ending with my knight against his dark squared bishop is going to be very difficult for him, probably losing. So I had a I thought it doesn't hurt to play a few more moves and see if he messes up. So here, that's my threat. I'm hoping he doesn't do anything about it, but of course, it's not really a threat now. And we agree to draw here. Probably a fair result considering the amount of mistakes that we both made. I think my mistakes were a little bit worse than his. Shame to mess up a nice position out of the opening like that. But you know, some interesting learning material in there. But yeah, right. I'm going to take a little throat break here and then come back for round 3. All right, we're fully loaded. Got paracetamol, strepsils, tea and honey. Everything's good. Okay, so uh, in the third round was kind of a key clash. Um, so uh, the top seed in this tournament is Toby Quate, and I do have permission to use Toby's name in this video. Um, yeah, he's one of, if not the top juniors in Yorkshire. Who's been over 2200 for a while now, since I think since playing in the Major Open in Liverpool, where he qualified for the British Championships recently. So yeah, Toby had um, lost in the previous round to Jael de Sosa, um, and therefore was on 1 out of 2, and I was on 1.5 out of 2. So as the highest rated player on one, since there was an uneven number of players uh, on 1.5, he got uploaded, and we met in round 3. And yeah, I'm gonna flip the colors around here so that we see this from the black side. I was black, and we're lucky enough here to have Toby's comments. Uh, so he's shared with me some of his thoughts and calculations uh, that went on during this game, which was pretty complicated and a bit sketchy in places, but uh, a very interesting game. Definitely an interesting game. So let's go without further ado. So basically, what happened here is I thought for 8 minutes on move one, and um, what I was thinking about. So Toby has played. He very often plays knight f3, and I think last time he played this against me, I replied with an invitation to a Dutch, and yeah, we had a fairly complicated game that ended in a draw, I think, and I was trying to decide whether I should repeat this or not. Um, Apparently, if I had, he would have just played a mainline Dutch, which I would have been quite unhappy about, probably. Because although I've been experimenting with the Dutch recently, I don't think I like it as a main opening. Maybe a surprise weapon now and then. But anyway, I decided against this. Didn't fancy it. So I played knight f6. And then what I was thinking about for those 8 minutes was, well, what am I going to do when, not if, when Toby plays g3 or b3? So I was expecting some kind of either single or double fianchetto here. So when he went e3, I just kind of laughed and I said I just wasted 8 minutes. And again, I could have gone g6 here. But like I said, I'm trying to learn these slightly more classical structures at the moment. So I played this with the idea that I might fianchetto the light squared bishop, which is a setup I've played online, but never over the board, I don't think. So d4, and now I thought if I go d5, which is kind of an obvious move to play, he's probably going to. I've seen him play kind of Collie Zukertort setup, and again, I would have no idea what I'm doing here, and he's probably played it dozens of times, and I'm just not really too familiar with the plans and nuances here. So this felt like it would be a bad idea. I also didn't feel very comfortable with this, although I played it because this was my plan, but I was really feeling here like, number one, I felt I was in danger of getting positionally outplayed. Just because I'm not, I can play reasonably sensible looking moves in a position like this, but I really don't know the nuances to a level that I'm happy with, to the level that I know other openings. I would be kind of making it up as I go along here. And the other thing was that I already felt like I was going to spend a lot of time. So having thought for 8 minutes on move one, I could see, what was going to happen, which is that Toby was going to be insta moving, very natural, solid positional moves. And I was going to be going into the tank, debating, should I play c5 now? Should I play it on the next move? Should I play a6? What about d6 or d5? Basically trying to work all this stuff out from scratch. So I was already feeling a little bit uncomfortable here. So, yeah, boink, boink. And here, this is a bit of a critical moment. Um, I played what I'm going to christen the Brainfart Gambit. You could also call it the round three Gambit, because we're playing three rounds of chess on a Saturday, which is really difficult. And by the if you've had two games, uh, like if your rounds one and two have gone a long time, which mine did, they both went down to the wire. By the time round three comes, you're kind of in a bit of an altered state. Three serious games of chess in one day is a lot, and then when you're up against, one of the highest rated people, well, the highest rated person in the tournament in that round three, uh, it's a very difficult ask for both of us to play high level chess in a game like that. You start thinking weird things and doing weird things essentially. And my thought process was literally this. I realized, like I said, that I was going to be tanking on really simple positional moves here, and that I was probably going to be half an hour down on the clock after 10 or 15 moves. I felt I was going to get into some slow position where I was probably going to be, if not slightly worse, then at least slightly at a disadvantage in terms of knowledge of plans. And I just wanted to change the way the game was going to go. Uh, and I didn't think too much about it. Um, I didn't really do any calculation whatsoever here. Not that there would be any calculation to do, because this is not a good move. Um, anyway, I played g5, which is a horrendous move. There's no justification for this move. Um, the only justification is, you could maybe say, psychological for me and for my opponent. So for me, I'm going to create a position where things are tactical and I'm forced to concentrate hard and play concretely and sharply from the first move. So instead of tanking over positional decisions, I'm going to be calculating concrete lines, and I'm going to be, trying to set up an attack. So it simplifies things for me, basically. I know what I have to do now, essentially. I have to not lose in the first few moves, and I have to try and put one or two rooks on the G file. I have to develop my Queen's Knight, Castle Queenside, and try to create a kingside attack. So my plan is now, we're set. And for my opponent's part, he's now completely off track. We're not playing a positional game anymore. He's got no choice but to accept this pawn. And, it was very obvious that he didn't want to, like, even though it's clearly the best move to take the pawn, right? Um, when you want to play a certain type of game, you don't want, like, even though taking the pawn is the best move here, it's like accepting a gambit, right? You don't really want to. It's like the Mora gambit. I hate playing the Mora gambit because you have to accept it. There's no really good way to decline the Mora gambit, I don't think. So you have to accept it. And in doing so, you have to enter a position where you're playing your opponent's game. You're giving them this free attacking position, and in return, you have to play a good defensive game. And you might not feel like doing that. That might not be your forte, or it might not be what you feel like doing right now. So that's the psychology behind the Brainfart Gambit. So, although I've said there's no choice but to take the pawn, apparently there is a choice. So the engine says almost every move here is good for white. So this is +1, apparently, because if you take it, rook e1. Now, if you just retreat this knight, then bishop takes g5 is going to be very strong. So you got to play something like this. And white is doing amazingly here. So e4 is a move. a4 is a move. +1, apparently. So if the g pawn comes along here, we just go back here. Okay, well, what do you do? I know what I'm doing if I'm black here, and my opponent has allowed me to play my pawn on to g4 like this. I'm going to play h5. Like, there's no way I'm not playing that move. And the engine just says, yep, no problem. You've got nothing. So this is like +1.1, 1.2. I guess I probably would have been happy to play this. But the engine says black has, compromised his position, wasted too much time, and has no attack. That's the engine's statement here, is there is no attack. So that's possible. Also, just developing moves like knight c3, rook e1. So it's very interesting. Basically, you can do anything. Apparently, g4, since g4 is apparently not a threat, then g5 has to be no good, right? So e1, g4, same thing. We go rook d2. This is just perfectly fine. Apparently, all these ways of declining the Brainfart Gambit are completely good for white. Having said that, clearly the best move is to take g8. And now, after the game, I thought knight f3 was best here. Apparently it's not. So what I should do now as black, play knight e4. And the idea is just to play f5. And I suppose we might have natural attacking moves like queen f6, g6. And although the white king hasn't been weakened, also, I suppose we've been given some time to get set up. I don't know. That this is what I thought might be most solid during the game. But Toby played f4, and the engine also agrees that this is the best move. The reason I thought this might not be so good because simply because it weakens the white king. But yeah, shows what I know. So best move here is very obvious, h6 apparently, but I played c5, which also makes sense. The idea is basically since f4 has been played, I can now open some lines and gain some time by attacking the white center. And knight d2 here is already a slight inaccuracy. So various good moves here. c3 is possible to just keep things solid. Knight c3 is what the engine gives as strongest. And then what I would want to play in this position, what I really want to play here is just knight c6, queen e7, castle queenside, right? That's the plan I want to accomplish. But there is this sharp pawn push here, which makes my life a little bit unpleasant. So knight c6 might not be the best. In fact, what the engine says I should do here. It's a bit of a toss up between playing d5 or bishop e7, but apparently none of it matters. Apparently everything here is plus 1.7 for white, so it loves knight c3. Um, the problem with knight d2 is, I guess, that this pawn is weakened, and the justification is that white wants to put the knight on e4, but this doesn't really benefit him. So uh, yeah, so Toby's comment here is that in hindsight, knight d2 is probably not a great decision because this is left unprotected, and also because it gives me some concrete tactical ideas of uh, pushing this pawn on here. Okay, so I kick the knight, and it's probably, well, it's clearly best move to just retreat the knight. So knight back, pawn takes, knight c6, c3, queen c7. I'm just going to develop, and yeah, it's a bit of a toss up. You could give a clear advantage here, or you could say it's slight advantage. It's somewhere between. It's somewhere in between. So basically, the engine is saying about plus 0.8. What is it exactly? I don't know, but by looking, I wouldn't have been too unhappy in this position, because basically I've survived the first few moves. I'm getting to castle queenside, and I'm going to be able to double my rooks on the g file. I've got a very clear plan, and I think white is going to have to be accurate. I guess there's also risk for me here. So if I castle queenside, there are pawn storm ideas for white here as well. So we're probably going to have a very exciting game here from this point. But this is definitely better for white than what happened. So yeah, knight comes back to e4, which was the idea behind knight d2. But for concrete tactical reasons, this is not quite so good. So this is the whole idea. And this is why I thought f4 might have been a mistake. But it's obviously, from the moves that we've seen, f4 was fine. It was knight. It was the next couple of moves that were a bit inaccurate. But basically, I'm getting something here. So by threatening to take on e3, I gain time for f5, which turns this bishop and this rook combination into a real problem. So Toby gives several lines that he looked at here. So first thing to look at is that this immediately loses to this little tactic here. Just loses a piece. Next thing is this is actually possible because f5, bishop e2, and white gets to keep a piece here, and he gets to sort his pieces out a bit. Crazy thing about it is this doesn't work. So although it looks like the queen is smothered mated here, bishop h5 check, king e7, and the knight drops. Yeah. And what I should mention, by the way, is that on this move, what Toby's written in his notes here is that he thought for 50 minutes. I actually don't know if it was 50 minutes. It was a long time. Could it really have been 50 minutes? I remember walking around a lot. Yeah. Let's say 40, 50. Anyway, he had an absolutely huge think here. The only move I'd really considered for white here was queen f3, which is what he played. So yeah, we both didn't even think about rook e1. I presume because of not seeing this f5 bishop e2 idea, which is quite nice. So, you know, when I first was starting to walk around while Toby was thinking, I was had various thoughts in my head, like, how did I get myself into this? What am I thinking? Am I just actually a really bad player? What's wrong with me? And then, after about half an hour, I was thinking, yeah, I'm a genius. I did exactly the right thing. I don't know. You go through all kinds of different thoughts when you've done something a bit weird in a game. So, Queen f3. Um, and now it appears that White is threatening a discovery and then to take the bishop on b7. So there's a couple of moves here, and I happen to play the best one. This is the main move. And if White goes knight check, takes here, this was my plan. I presumed that this would be kind of like that I would have compensation here, basically. I didn't think this was winning. After the game, when we were looking at it, Toby thought that this would be practically winning for black because the queen was going to get trapped. But yeah, the engine says this is equal. The queen doesn't get trapped. And yeah, I don't know. There is another move possible after f5, which I don't remember considering. So basically what happens here is if you take this, knight takes, and then d5. Now Toby says that he looked at this but stopped calculating at this point because it looks like, well, White has simply lost a piece. But after something like this, apparently White has more than full compensation for the piece here. So this is plus 0.8, which means that it's very dangerous for black. But anyway, I had never intended to play. So sometime during the long think, I had already decided what I was going to play here, which was c takes d4, basically with the idea that these discoveries are not dangerous now because, so let's have a look. So if White went like this now, we go knight c6, and we've regained a pawn. So black is actually better here. So White doesn't have time to do anything like that. So I thought there was no choice here but to recapture the pawn. But apparently this is also good. It's hard to work out some of these lines. Engine says knight c6 is actually the best move here. If you take, then the idea is we have a line like this. Takes, takes, bishop takes, bishop takes, queen takes, e2. And now the engine wants rook f2. So this is some pretty loopy stuff. I guess this is a more human reaction. So we get this kind of position. Black is still a pawn down. Looks dangerous. Engine gives it as about equal. I think that's a hard move to consider, just giving the pawn up just like that. So taking back, by far the most natural move. Knight c6. Again, this was the only move I considered, and it's the only good move. C3. Only good move. And now it's finally time for f5. So at this point, my opening has kind of justified itself. I don't have absolutely full compensation, but it's pretty close to equality here, which is the same as saying full compensation for a pawn. So I can't really ask for anything more than this. Couple of good moves here for white. So h3 and queen h3. What was played in the game? Knight f2. So if queen h3, I didn't consider this move. Toby says that he thought about this. And best move for black here is queen e7. If I take this piece, then check, king e7, knight takes. This is another of those lines where white has more than full compensation for the piece. But how would you evaluate this? So if Toby said he couldn't evaluate this position correctly during the game. I didn't even look at it, but even if I had, what's going on here? How do you arrive at an evaluation of this position? Especially since we're operating under limited time. What's going on here? So obviously black's king is weak. Obviously white has excellent development and attacking prospects, but it is black to move here, and it seems like there should be multiple ways to try to unravel and hang on to extra material. Let's see what happens if we play something really obvious here. So one of the first moves I'd consider here would be trying to trade the queens off. So then we get queen h4 check, king f7, f5, the hammer of doom. Yeah, so that now looks pretty obvious, right? So queen e8, no good. So what if we do d5? So apparently this f5 resource now, look at this. f5, d takes e4, pawn takes e6. Wow. Now, if I continue to munch material, we're going to have this kind of shenanigans going on. Oh, look at this. Yeah. Totally winning for white. What else have we got? We've got very little we can do about this. We go queen there, then rook check. Ooh, so if we go to d6, we're getting mated, apparently. Go d8, queen d5 check. Oh, look at this. Look at this move. Wow. Bishop a6, forced to take it. Only move. The threat is rook c7. Rook g7. Rook takes f8. Queen takes f8. Wow, look at this. King d8. Queen takes a8 check. Rook f1. White is still a piece down here, and the attack is still unstoppable. This is plus 6.6. Like, There is absolutely no way for a human to calculate all this. Like, absolutely no way. Some of these are only moves for white to keep that attack going. There's so many lines I didn't even look at here. So have to you would somehow have to intuitively evaluate that that in this position white has full compensation or more for the piece, right? There's no way you can calculate probably even that one specific line we looked at, which had several only moves for white, in order 10 moves later to reach a position where you are still a piece down and you have to evaluate that position and know that you have an unstoppable attack, right? So this is completely impossible. So you would have to look at this and say, yeah, I have full compensation for a piece here. I don't think you can possibly know that. So for that reason, Queen H3 doesn't seem playable. It's fascinating. I could probably look at some of those lines for half an hour here, but this would end up being a yet another marathon video. So I'm gonna stop. But what a crazy position! I was so tempted to go through some more of those lines. Okay, so instead of looking at Queen H3 madness here, this is what was played in the game: Knight F2. Now, there's only one move here for me to be better, and it's not a move I considered at all. So apparently, I should play Knight F6 here. I don't really understand the logic behind this move. Why am I retreating the knight? In my mind, I'm happy to make this exchange, right? White isn't threatening to take my knight because I'll recapture with the rook. I'll have pressure on g2. Like, in my mind, this is not a significant exchange. So why would I avoid it? Why would I go knight? You know, maybe the idea is to prevent white from playing d4, d5. Maybe that's the idea. Might make sense. Anyway, I didn't consider knight f6 at all. What I played is queen c7. Toby examined. Ah, yes, we both examined this move. So for quite a while, I thought this might be winning. And I couldn't find a win here. And I was driving myself mad. And the reason is because there is no win here. You know, to me, this is absolutely incredible. But there's nothing here. So queen e2. And what do you play? I'm sure I had intended something like knight takes h2, but then saw that queen h5 check just picks the knight up, right? So I can't do that. But surely there's something else we can do with the knight, right? But there isn't. So, like, there. First of all, this is good still. But also in this position, you can just play g3. Takes. And king takes. And white is down in exchange, but apparently has a huge position and is quite a bit better here. So this is a really puzzling. This was really puzzling me during the game. You know, I was looking at this for ages after knight a5, queen e2, thinking, how can I not have a win here? Like, there's nothing. I was looking at this. I was thinking, there's got to be something here, right? King takes g2. How can there be no good discovery here? But there's nothing. Absolutely nothing here. This is +2 for white. Completely winning. So yeah, this bothered me during the game, and eventually I had to reject knight a5. So since I didn't know what to do, I thought I'm at least going to just get developed and castle queenside. So queen e2, castles, And we have another interesting moment. So uh, Toby played this, which is very obvious. Um, I wasn't too worried about it. I mean, all things being equal, I would have liked to hang on to this bishop, but I thought, if my queen gains this diagonal instead, that's probably just as good. Um, and this rook now gets to come over and participate. So I was okay with this. Um, I don't think I'd decided exactly how I was going to follow it up until we actually got to this position. Um, Apparently, a better move here is knight f3, which makes sense. And I didn't particularly have a plan here. I think probably this would definitely be the first move that would spring to my mind here. Develop the bishop, attack f4, and prepare the way to double the rooks on the g file. I probably would have felt very comfortable here. The engine says this is totally fine, slightly better for white. So we would get something like this. Now, apparently, it wants to trade the bishops. Anyway, so we had bishop a6 straight away, and the problem is that it allows my next move. So knight takes h2, which Toby had seen, and he very quickly played the next move, which turns out to be a losing mistake. If I respond correctly, which, spoiler alert, I don't. White should take, apparently. So how this was going to go was I was going to play rook takes g2. And now, if he takes, we will get to this position here. So knight takes e2, bishop takes e2, bishop c5. And although white has plenty of material for the queen here, this attack is going to be death. So these pieces can't come into the defense. These bishops are monstrous. Rook's coming over. So, this looked winning, and it is winning. So white can't take that rook. Instead, he goes into the corner, which looks like suicidal. But apparently it's fine. So knight takes d4. And white plays this very calm move. Look at this. Queen c4. And there's nothing. It's amazing. This is another of these positions. I probably would have had my head in my hands at the board, like, oh, where's the win? Why am I so stupid? But there's nothing here. So the best you can do here is black. So bishop c5 is the only move not to be losing, even. And now we've got all kinds of threats, right? Taking on b7 is a blunder because we now have winning threats. Only move, knight de4. F takes. Takes. d5. Takes the bishop. King takes. Queen moves. Protect the rook. Take the bishop. Yeah, all of this, by the way, is still within the realms of equality. Like, look at that evaluation bar. You would think one side or the other has to be winning here, right? What would you do here? Queen f7, c6 check. Now we can go where? We can go b8 or c7. Let's go to b8. Queen h3. And we could keep on going down this line, but the engine is just giving 0.0. How do you evaluate lines like this? Like, which of us would want to go for this position and why? And would either of us say it was a draw or not? Like, you know, if black plays queen g6 here, now it's lost. So what we've got to do here is just kick the queen. Queen h2. Queen f5. Bishop d2. And now that's the problem here, right? The engine actually wants to play bishop e3 here. Just give that full piece up and get some rooks traded. And I suppose the reason for the 0 evaluation is that eventually, I guess what's going to happen is the major pieces will get traded, some pawns will get liquidated, and we'll eventually come down to an ending where white has an extra piece, black has a couple of pawns, and it's a theoretical draw. That's probably where this is all going. But like, yeah, how can you evaluate this during a game? And therefore, if we go way back, because we have to remember, where did we actually come from here? What we're trying to do is figure out what happens if white takes this knight. So we are trying to evaluate what happens after this. So how can you possibly evaluate the consequences of king h1 here? Like, it's crazy. So we've both myself and Toby have walked ourselves into a situation here where it's basically impossible for either of us to play the best moves, which therefore means after we look at the game with an engine, we look like idiots. So, knight takes h2, d5. So this was a concept that I think had come into Toby's calculations in many lines, was that he would have this resource to try and close up the long diagonal. And so I make a big mistake here. There's several good moves for me here. So first start, I can just take this. Yeah, easy peasy. Because takes, queen takes, bishop takes, check, king takes, queen takes, and let's count. So material is about equal. So white has 2 knights for a rook and a pawn. And it's a slight advantage black because black still has an attack. So bishop c5 and doubling the rooks on the g file is a threat here. And white is not fully developed and coordinated. So therefore, black is a bit better here. So that was a fairly simple line that I could have played. The best move here is to just take the bishop, which obviously I must have considered, but I don't remember calculating it very deeply, and I might have intuitively rejected it. But I can't remember what I would have thought happens here, because obviously if white actually takes this piece, he's now completely lost. He's forced to sack one of these knights on e4 to prevent mate. And this is minus 4.5. And that's pretty easy to see. Is there anything else for white here? That's not possible. Maybe I didn't evaluate this right. So if he takes the knight on h2, queen takes f4 check. And if king g1, then the engine says mate in 19. Queen g3. This is forced. C5. Yeah, this is obviously completely losing. Right, this is easy as well. So he can't take the knight on h2. And anything else he does, we're going to take the rook on f1. So let's say he goes here. So this is actually the engine top move, is just to play rook d1. Now we can play bishop c5. So we're indirectly protecting our little knight there. Yeah, so the engine says knight b3 is the best for white here. He again can't take here because of the same thing. So yeah, why did I not play this? Like, this is... Toby was down to a couple of minutes here. I had loads of time. I don't know how much time I had here, but I had loads of time. And I don't remember seriously considering bishop takes a6 here. Like, really, this just would have taken a little bit of accurate calculation and the game was won here. You know? So, this is hard to understand. I don't remember looking seriously at any move other than bishop c5 here. I had some sort of fixed idea about this move. So there we go. Toby instantly blunders back. The right move here is... now, I can't remember, was I going to take with the king or the queen here? Let's presume it was the king. So maybe what happened, see, I would have definitely calculated the consequences of this. And I'm better almost winning here. But the problem is that he just takes the knight on h2. And I'm sure that I looked at this. And I looked at this. And I looked at this. And I thought this was winning. And it is winning. Right? But he doesn't play king g1 here. It's king h1. And now white is winning. And how do you evaluate that? That's a really hard one. So basically, you can't gain a tempo on the king because the knight comes in here and you've no threats. If you go queen g3, looking for mate, now d takes, and again knight h3. So basically, it's all about not having a pin on this knight. So actually, that's fairly simple, right? King h1, there's no pin on the knight, therefore the mate threats don't work. But I didn't see this. After queen takes f4 check, for some reason, I only thought about king g1. Oops. So knight b3 from Toby. So, you know, I've got very little excuse at this point. Like I said, I had loads of time. Toby was down to, I don't know, probably less than a minute at this point. So we're not going to criticize any of these moves. The position is still ridiculously complicated. So I finally take that rook. Knight takes c5. Blunder, again, hard to criticize. If you take here, yeah, we get, again, this kind of line. And yeah, we've looked at these kind of lines before. This is still a winning attack for black. Takes the bishop. And now, another miscalculation from me, and this one is even stupider, right? So I took back here. Um, I looked at this move, and I looked at this. So we get this takes. I looked at this check there check king g1 king takes b7 takes with check takes. I got to this position and I miscounted the material. So I thought I was down material here when I was calculating. Um, but I'm the exchange up, and it's -5. So again, pretty embarrassing miscalculation there. I don't actually know where I went wrong, but I thought there was an extra piece for white somewhere, or I don't know. I honestly can't explain this one. I looked at this line, but there we go. So yeah, I took back there. Um, Now, although this is marked as a blunder, I am still clearly better after this move, so it's not so bad. Takes, queen takes. So the blunders have stopped for now. For a while now, we play decent moves. Rook g3. Now, in the post-game analysis, we looked at this move with the idea of playing knight e1 to defend g2, and we were thinking maybe this might be better than the game for white. But in fact, it's just an incredibly powerful attack for black. These pieces are still completely useless. So although black is in theory down a little bit of material, actually it's more like he's up a rook here. Very easy attacking plan with the H pawn. Not much white can do. So Toby played this, and that is actually the best move. Rook g6. Yeah, king h2 given as a mistake, but like, how are you supposed to calculate here? Yeah. This is an incredibly difficult position to defend, even if you had full time. So the end it says play a4, and I guess the idea here is that you're threatening to exchange the queens off, and therefore you gain a little bit of time. So we have something like a4, and I can either tuck the king away in the corner, or close it out with c4. But in any case, white is making something happen on this side of the board, which means he disrupts black's initiative a little bit. Anyway, in the game we got king h2. This is all very logical. But yeah, very, very simple attacking plan, and the king is just going to be too exposed here. Bishop f2 given as a mistake. Rook f1 is better, but it's all losing for white at this point. Apparently, this is I can win directly here by this, which makes sense. If takes, then this is just winning that piece. Yeah, I should have seen this because I was trying to find ideas of pushing these pawns, but I missed it on this move. Queen b5 is still fine. b4 was actually an excellent practical move, which does make me go wrong in a couple of moves here. So I thought I was just going to infiltrate the queen here. b1 check, and now I have a little multiple choice about where to put the king here. I have 5 moves I can make, and I make the second worst one. So the worst move I can do here is to put the king on a6, and then queen f1 check, and now I have to work pretty hard actually not to be lost. So I have to play queen c4. So I would never consider playing this move, but I did manage to find the second worst move, which was to put the king on c8. So this actually gives white a miracle draw here if he's able to see it with queen f1, where I've got to be careful. So if I do this, that's mate in 6. I could see this happening in a time scramble, right? King d8, queen d6 check. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh dear. Oh dear. And it's, mate is happening here. So if I manage to see the threat here, then again, I have to play this move. Takes, takes. And now this is a draw. So that would have been a very unpleasant surprise. Obviously, putting the king anywhere else is fine. c7 is fine. a8 is fine. Even c6 is fine. Because if I go to c6 and he tries the same idea, well, it nearly draws, but apparently this is a better version for me, I guess, because the king is so active. This pawn can now be defended, and therefore it's a threat. So, anyway, neither of us saw this, but, you got to be careful right up to the very last moves. So these were the final moves. Yeah, it's marking queen c1 as a blunder here because I've got a much quicker win with playing a rook to the h file with check here. And that's the end of the game. So, really interesting game. Some of the points in this game for analysis were really, really interesting. Not sure what else to say about it. The number of blunder marks at the engine awards makes it seem like this was one of the worst games ever played, but it really wasn't. I think this was just a really interesting, practical game. Very complicated. Could have gone either way. Lots of calculation required. Both of us made lots of mistakes. And I guess the only good thing I can say about my opening move is that it had the desired result, which is that I got the kind of game that I wanted rather than the kind of game that my opponent wanted. But, the cost was a bit too high. I definitely wouldn't repeat that move. That was way too much to give up at that point in the opening, and I should have been practically lost. All right, I have time traveled one day into the future here and feel much more rested and ready to have a look at game 4 of my tournament. So this was against a strong young player who I've played before. I've had a good record against him before, but he's been improving an awful lot recently. So it's always dangerous playing young players. And for whatever reason, I decided to play a new opening for me here. So my usual repertoire as white revolves around the bishop's opening, which is, I've been playing this for absolutely ages. I've been playing it since I was young, and I know it pretty well. I'm not likely to get into massive amounts of danger out of the opening. Uh, if black handles it correctly, then there's more than one way to equality. But recently I've been trying to experiment with new things, and for some reason I decided that now is the time to play my first ever Spanish. And I had a particular idea in mind. I don't know the theory of the mainline Spanish, um, apart from things that I've read in Gary Kasparov's books, which are pretty out of date nowadays. So I don't know Berlin. I don't know, latest theory and all these kind of slow Carlson Roys with D3. And I wasn't intending to play any of that. So we get here and I play this Queen E2 move. And this is just an idea that I got from Sergei Tvyakov's books. Um, so I keep on plugging rock solid chess. I might as well plug it one more time. But he has a chapter on flexibility with castling, and he gives a lot of examples of his games in the Queen E2 uh, system in the Spanish. So I don't know anything about it other than that, and I don't know any move order nuances or anything. Um, the main idea of this move is really just to get out of any theory that we might both know. Um, and also, I was trying to avoid, so I assumed that my opponent, being a young player, might have prepared something against my bishop's opening. After the game, he said that he didn't, and he doesn't usually do that. Anyway, this turned out to be a bad decision because I quickly got into a position I didn't understand. So yeah, the usual move here would be bishop c5, uh, d6. At first, I thought was a little less ambitious. c3 seems obvious. Um, and now I was quite surprised by this. And I thought something has to be wrong with this because I just wasn't aware of any plans where black fianchettos is king's bishop in the Spanish. Now, this is most likely just my own ignorance. Um, and it put me in a dangerous frame of mind because I thought, okay, there has to be something wrong with this, and I should be looking for a way to punish it. This is a bit too slow, and maybe there's some sort of tactical or strategic way to exploit this. It can't be right. Um, Having looked at the engine evaluations, G6 is completely reasonable. It's the engine's second preference in this position. You can play B5, very logical. It likes this G6 plan, and you can also just go in traditional Spanish fashion with Bishop E7 here. So it's all good. It's all tiny advantage white. Uh, so yeah, G6. Wasn't quite sure what to do here. Castles, kingside, and d4 are both completely reasonable here. I can't remember d4 is the most obvious move, and I did think about playing that, but for some reason I thought that after something like this takes bishop g4, I just wasn't quite sure about this, and I thought I might have prematurely advanced in the center. Um, one of those things that you think that, and then with hindsight you think, well, what was I thinking here? There's no problem at all. My center is fairly secure. I can just defend with this. I guess the critical idea is, can black take here? And the very obvious answer that the engine chucks up straight away is nope, because he'd lose a piece. Not difficult to see. So this is a good way of defending d4. I probably needed to just spend a bit more time calculating here. But the thing is, because I'd been reading these books, in a lot of these games, Tivyakov would go d3 instead of d4. So I just kind of played without really having any deep ideas in mind here. G7, castles, castles. Apparently, with d3 is a bit slow, and the engine already very slightly prefers black here, which is quite a surprise to me. Uh, but I don't understand the position at all. So there you go. So rookie one, knight h5, good plan. This kind of takes advantage a little bit of the fact that my queen is on e2, because knight f4 now has to be dealt with. And also the other plan that's coming in here is f5. And I was already feeling, I had a combination of feelings here. I felt a little uncomfortable because I felt like I understood black's position better than white's here. You know, if I was black, I'd want to play f5 and, you know, attack on the king side. That's what I like to do. And I wasn't quite sure as white what I should be doing to stop this, but at the same time, I felt like I haven't done anything wrong here and I shouldn't be worse, you know. And in fact, maybe black is getting over ambitious and I should be looking for concrete refutations of what he's trying to do here. So this was a dangerous frame of mind, as we're going to see in a couple of moves. So I played this move, which is just kind of asking for trouble, really. I need to be a little bit more conservative. Uh, I need to accept that f5 is coming, and there's not much I can do about it. So the engine suggests just playing bishop e3 here. Anyway, my idea was to actually provoke, you know, force black to play f5 here. So f6. Yeah, and here I played bishop b3 check. Now apparently this is also a mistake, right? So many things about this position that I don't understand. Bishop b3 check here is a mistake. I thought this was a very obvious move to play. I thought I want to put my bishop on this diagonal before black gets a chance to take it for himself. Right? That seemed like, you know, it seemed like if I was going to be exploiting this f pawn having moved, then I want my bishop on this diagonal. I can only assume that it's a mistake because black's king is actually better on h8. I don't know. So anyway, bishop b3 check, king h8, bishop e3. Now f5 apparently is a slight inaccuracy here as well. It's the most obvious move to play, but the engine thinks that queen e8 first is better. I'm not going to try and go into the subtleties of why that is. So f5, pawn takes. Yeah, apparently all three moves are possible here. So you can take with the pawn. I thought knight g5 would be strong here, but apparently knight f6, knight f7 check, takes, f4, and black, this is about equal. So black has strong compensation for the exchange here. So that is playable, but I understand why my opponent avoided it. Rook takes f5 is also playable, apparently. Yeah, looks fine. And my opponent chose bishop takes f5, which is very logical, and that was the move I was expecting. And here I just went completely off the rails. So I made a tactical miscalculation here, quite a simple one. So I played knight g5. So here I thought, okay, this is the moment where I exploit my opponent's weakening of his kingside position. And after the game, he told me that he'd already calculated that this was no good, but had to recheck all his calculations because if I played this, he must have missed something. So don't trust your opponent. You know, they make mistakes. It was like, I was like, no, I'm just bad sometimes. So d5, best move. And yeah, I now realized I'd made a completely embarrassing miscalculation. So basically I thought um, g4 wins a piece here, because if knight f4, then I've got bishop takes f4, pawn takes bishop, and I just completely missed the fact that my knight would be hanging on g5 at the end of this sequence. I don't know what to say about this. I realized it now that d5 was played, but the problem is, I'm now, by playing knight g5, I'm already committed. I've worst case scenario, I'll probably like just have to retreat that knight, and I'm just considerably worse here. Black has an absolutely amazing position now, full center, and he's going to have just a really easy attack on my king. I thought I might even be just actually dead lost in this position. The engine says it's minus 1.2, so it's not yet complete panic stations. The engine wants me to play either h3, which looks very dangerous, or just play the knight back. And I assumed that after knight back, bishop g4 would be a killer, but apparently it's okay, so I can play this. And it's very important that this doesn't win. So e4, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, pawn takes. And although I'm worse here, apparently I'm not lost. So this is about minus 0.6 in favor of black. I mean, it's a horrible position. He can go knight f4 if he wants. I'm completely passive. I'm going to be tied down to defending these pawns, but it is possible to defend here. If he puts a lot of effort into winning, say, the f3 pawn, I'm probably going to get counter chances somewhere. So this would have been a good moment for me to collect my thoughts, realize that I was worse, and calculate a way out of this. But that's not what I did. So I carried on with my plan. So I played g4, which really is objectively close to losing here. So knight f4, bishop takes, pawn takes, and now h4 is practically forced. And I thought I might have time to consolidate here, because the only good square for the bishop to retreat to is c8. So if he goes to, obviously he can't go to e6. If he goes here, then the d pawn is hanging. So we got to this position, and I thought, right, time for a really good think and find a way to shore up the position. And the more I thought, the more I realized how much trouble I was in. And the main problem is, I would love to be able to play this move, but very simple, h6. And if I do something like, if I retreat here, then he's just going to take my h pawn, and the queen is coming into my position, and I'm going to be dead. So if I go knight e6, bishop takes, queen takes, and now very simple. And there's no defense here. This is utterly losing. So I've got a big problem here, because if I don't protect the g pawn, then one of these two pawns basically is going to fall. The engine says best move here is queen f3, and then we get h6, knight e6, bishop takes, rook takes, queen takes, and now apparently I can take this pawn, or I can develop my knight. I'm not sure which I would have done in the game. Apparently these are sort of roughly equivalent value. It looks riskier to take the pawn. So basically black's threat here is to bring the knight in. And I'm not sure what move is best. Let's assume that I might develop the knight Knight comes in here, and basically the exchange sacrifice is forced here. And I guess I have to take the pawn so that I get a little bit of material back. c6, bishop e4. And we reach this position. And I've kind of consolidated a little here. I'm not getting mated. I am exchange down, clean exchange down. I don't even have a pawn for it. So this is basically close to winning for black. The only good thing about it is black's king is not completely safe. So if he misplays this, and I'm allowed to consolidate even further, I'm going to try to play moves like king g2, d4. In my dreams, I might be allowed to create a queen and bishop battery here and start attacking on these light squares. But black has very good plans of his own. Maybe he's going to try playing h5 here. He can double his rooks on the f file. I think I would get, this is the best I can do, right? So this is what I should have played. But instead, I played knight d2, which is not like disastrously worse, but I am now at -2. So I'm basically hovering on the line between being lost and having some saving chances. And I was kind of just hoping I might get away with it here because there's a couple of moves my opponent can play. I was hoping he would play the most obvious one. If he plays h6, then I have some chances for consolidation. So I'm actually kind of surviving here because queen takes h4. I can take here, and although I may, so what happens if he goes right? So he can't straight away go here, I guess, because I'm just going to take it and get 2 rooks for the queen, which means I get a move to maybe play the bishop back here. And I'm not getting mated because this f pawn hasn't moved. So that's what I'm hoping for. Now, if I do play knight e6, he shouldn't take it. He should play this interference move. And then we get this sequence here. These are all forced moves. And in this position, let's count the material. Material is equal, but black is clearly better. He's got the 2 bishops and more activity. But again, it's not lost. So, I can fight on here. So yeah, I was hoping for h6, but my opponent was playing very well, and he finds clearly the best move. So at this point, I wasn't feeling very good. I really couldn't see a way out of this mess. It was looking horrible. And I go wrong again here. So my next move turns this into objectively completely losing. At the moment, it's not completely losing. It's -2 or so. If I go queen e3 and just give up this pawn and then play knight takes like that, there's no immediately losing sequence for me here. I mean, it's horrible, but I can kind of survive. Like, so if he plays h6, I can wriggle out a little bit with these moves, get my knight back. So yeah, instead, after he played f3, I took right away with my knight. Bishop takes g4, bishop d1. He plays bishop h6, which is the second best move in the position here. Queen d7 is all slightly better. Everything is winning for black now. So after bishop h6, I mean, this position is almost -4. So queen f1. Bishop takes. Again, he's very slightly giving me some saving chances here. Most accurate, again, is probably queen d7. So basically the idea is get the bishop in here, chase the queen out, and try and give mate. There's not an awful lot I can do about this. So if he goes queen d7, I have to go king h1, and then various nice attacking moves here. So he can play bishop f4, rook f4. So basically he should be just trying to mate me here. Instead of swapping pieces off, he should be trying to mate me. I suppose to supply a little bit of psychological context, my opponent had very recently crossed the 2000 barrier, and if he managed to beat me, I would be, I think, by far the highest rated player he'd beaten. So it's understandable that there'd be some nerves here, and he was using probably a little bit too much time on the clock, which was my only chance. But he wasn't in time trouble at this point at all. So anyway, it's still completely fine to trade here. It's still about -3. He picks up the pawn, but at this point I'm feeling like, okay, I'm kind of getting to bail out a little bit here. So bishop h3 is a bit of a mistake. So again, he should be thinking about mating me or winning my queen. So best line here is to take on d1, rook takes, and then rook f4. And yeah, I'm in big trouble here. So if I play, say, f3, rook f5, queen h2, queen g5, check, king h1. Just really simple moves by black. He's still threatening to win my queen here. So I've got to play something like this. And then he can play several moves here. Most obvious would be this. And then he can play anything he wants here. So, I guess you would bring the other rook in, or the knight may come to e5. But this is all -5. So there's really no escape for me here. I can shuffle around my king and queen a bit, and I can try and wriggle out, but the engine says this is death. So my opponent played bishop h3, which allows me to trade the queens. And even though, objectively speaking, I'm going into a far worse endgame by trading here, this is like way better for me than what could have happened. So queen g3, and he shouldn't trade here, by the way. So apparently this is best. Just, I don't think I can take this bishop. Yeah, so I'm getting mated after that. The rook on e1 is hanging here. So I guess I have to trade. Rook takes. Yeah, and the difference here, I remember now, I had seen this in the game, and the difference here is that the h pawn is passed. And this is a huge difference. This makes a massive difference to any end games, because essentially the h pawn here is just going to be a killer. Now, I'm still not, believe it or not, I'm not lost here. It's -1.4. So I should lose with best play, but there's going to be all kinds of scope for tricks and swindles here. But this was a better chance than what he played in the game. So in the game, he traded right away, and now the h pawn is not passed, which means that it just gives me more saving chances. Let's put it that way. It means that he's got to do some work to create a pass pawn on the king side. So I'm just going to skip over some of these moves because we start playing some moves that don't make a massive difference. These are just kind of sensible consolidating moves here. Uh, both playing fairly accurately. Uh, there's not going to be any way for me to avoid a mass exchange of rooks. I was looking for a way to keep pieces on the board and keep it complicated, but I can't really. I can't afford to allow black's rooks into my position. So basically, what I was looking forward to is an end game where the rooks are off, and I try to find some way of obtaining a minor piece end game that I've got drawing chances with. So my main idea here was to try to force his pawns onto light squares, and then try to um, leave him with the light squared bishop, and ideally myself with the knight. So basically, I want to trade that knight, get his pawns on light squares, and trade that knight. That's my only sort of counter plan here. Um, Now here, I thought this was a good move, but apparently it's not. Apparently, I'm now losing again. Uh, According to the engine, I shouldn't be panicking here. Um, I can play it slowly, so the engine says you can play King F2. Like I should be sort of playing the position quite slowly and waiting for Black to come up with a winning plan. But I thought I saw an opportunity to um, get some activity going, so I played C4. Uh, Now, the idea of this is if he plays knight takes d4, then I've got pawn takes d5. Uh, he can't take my bishop with check because knight takes, and then I'm going to win a piece. And this takes here, takes, takes, takes. And I thought I might have chances to save this here. Now, if I trade the rooks off, this is pretty nasty for me because the rook is actually very strong here. I can't afford to take this because that rook will be way too active and I won't be able to hold that ending. Um, so I would have to do this, and then I do actually have fairly decent chances to draw this. So that was my idea. So I didn't think knight takes d4 was the best move. Also, this doesn't look good because I'm going to take here, knight takes c4. And I thought, now I'm not in any trouble at all. So I'm still a pawn down, but it's completely meaningless because of how weak these pawns are. Obviously, he cannot take my knight because of the pin on the e-file. And the engine agrees. The engine says this is now equal and white's not in any trouble anymore. Uh, but the problem with the move is simply that um, black doesn't have to do anything here. He doesn't have to make either of these captures. And I've actually weakened my own pawn structure. So I've weakened the d4 pawn and loosened things up a bit. So basically what the engine is saying is this looks fun, it looks good, but I'm only weakening my own position and I'm not actually gaining anything. So anyway, c4. This is one of the best moves. You can play either of these moves. So bishop f7, excellent move. I have no choice but to trade. So it takes the rooks, and yeah, king f2. So I kind of have to bring the king to the center now to come to the defense of d pawn. c3 is inaccurate. So I mentioned before that my plan was to get his pawns on light squares. So this gives me what I want. Now it's still clearly better for black here, but I have clearer plans now. So what he should do instead is, this move is unnecessary, so I'm not actually threatening to take the d pawn. Um, so he should probably just bring his king into the center or advance the h pawn. So c6 is just kind of slightly unnecessary move, and maybe maybe he is probably just trying to get things solid. Make sure that nothing was hanging in his position. But it does. I've got the outlines of drawing chances now. I play c5 now. Apparently, this is inaccurate as well. So apparently, I should not be rushing to fix the pawn structure here. Apparently, I should play knight b3. But we were both starting to play quite fast now, and I didn't see what was wrong with this move, because this was an essential part of my plan to, fix these pawns on light squares. Apparently knight b3 here is slightly inaccurate as well. Apparently I should play g4 here. That makes sense. Yeah, that move makes sense. So the idea of g4 is two ideas here. So first of all, I'm delaying h5. And second, I'm keeping a piece out of f5. So, instinctively in an endgame, I would not be wanting to put a pawn on the same color as my bishop. And also, if I was thinking about playing this move, what I would be afraid of here would be something like black fixing that pawn there, and then, coming to round it up. And also, this pawn here gets in the way of one of my plans. So if this bishop basically ever leaves this diagonal, I want the option to get my bishop down there. So for that reason, g4 wasn't on my radar at all. I wouldn't have wanted to put a pawn there. But it's the best move, so there you go. So knight b3. I'm not going to comment on every single move of this ending, because, again, I don't want this video to go on forever. Yeah, so the reason I've played knight a5 is just I want to get b4 in, and if I don't hurry up about it, then this knight is going to come to f5. And if he gets there, then he's going to permanently keep my knight on b3, which is going to block the b pawn. So yeah, I just wanted to get b4 in before that happens. Yeah, that's a bit of a weird move. Much more straightforward plan here would be either to bring the king up or to just immediately start advancing the pawns. So, king h6 and g5 makes a lot of sense here. Knight e7 just gives me a little bit of extra time here. So I play a4. Apparently I should play b5 straight away here. Yeah, interesting moment. So if I play b5, the reason I didn't want to do this is because I had dreams of trying to win these pawns. But it does make more sense to try and liquidate them. The more pawns come off the board, then the more possibility there is for me to draw in the end by sacking a minor piece for a remaining pawn. So that makes sense. I should have thought about b5. But at the moment, I was just, kind of... Bishop d3 is a bit of a holding move. But now, black starts his pawns rolling. So from this point on, he plays really excellently for the next several moves, and is now completely winning. So this was my last chance. I was trying to hold that pawn, and my opponent was in time trouble here, and I was, I guess, close to time trouble. And while we were sitting there thinking, I didn't quite see how he breaks this blockade. So my idea was, if he plays knight f5, takes, bishop takes, knight g3. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't quite see how he breaks this, right? Where can he put? So my knight, basically, my plan here is I'm either going to jump back and forth from between these two squares, or if he plays back here, say, then I can go back and forth between these squares, right? So I'm holding that pawn. And if he brings his king back up out this direction, then the idea is I put my king on this square, put my knight on one of these two squares, and I can keep him out. And I didn't see how he gets through this, right? And he probably didn't either. This is really hard stuff to calculate. Now the engine is just saying it's -6 here, right? Black is utterly winning. But the engine evaluation doesn't actually tell you how to win it. Now if we look at one of the engine lines here, let's see what it's doing. So knight e2, bishop c2, a5, bishop d3. Okay, knight g3, king h3, knight h5, and now it wins like this. Look at this. G3 check, knight takes g3, king g4. This is crazy. So I can't bring the king over because he's going to outflank me and win my pawns. So this is a pretty elementary king and pawn win. I can't protect my pawns. He just zugzwangs me away, wins the d pawn, and it's an easy win. So where do I? And I can't move my knight. You look at this opposition of the bishop and the knight. All of the squares that I would like to put my knight on are covered. So the only place I can move my knight is into the corner. And then he's going to go king f4, king e4, and he's going to eat the d pawn. So the only other move for me here is king g2, and then king f4, king f2, and then another zugzwanging move. So he can go anywhere on this diagonal. And again, what can I do? I've got to move something. So if the knight moves anywhere, then king comes and eats the d pawn. And the king can't move anywhere, it has to protect the knight, so I can only go there, and then king comes and eats the d pawn. So really beautiful and instructive, actually, that what he has to do back here is allow me to get the ending that I want and use zugzwang. Really nice zugzwang motifs to win the game there. So that's a lovely end game. I'm actually really glad I went down that engine line because that's very instructive. Really hard to calculate this with a couple of minutes left. I mean, basically, like, you can't calculate it. You would either have to have already studied an endgame like this and know how the zugzwang is going to work, or you can't go into it because if you're not sure, then it just looks like it might be a draw. It looks like white might have some kind of fortress here. Yeah, really interesting. There are other ways to try and get through, I think. So my opponent played bishop there, which makes sense, but I don't have to exchange. So that would be a disaster for me. I can't exchange those, so I retreat. Knight here, small inaccuracy. So again, this allows me to play b5, which I should, but don't play. So I just play my knight back. Bishop back, knight back. Knight f8 is quite a mistake. Now, black is actually still winning even after this. But this, it now requires really precise play. So I don't know what the idea of knight f8 was, but again, my opponent was in significant time trouble now. So knight f8, and now the problem for black is I'm now thinking about mating motifs. So I've got a little threat here of putting the bishop there and then going knight g3, knight f1, checkmate. Bishop f5, knight g3. And now we have the big blunder. Black is still totally winning here. So apparently the way to do it is very calmly. Bishop g6, bishop g2, and again we have this key square for the bishop. So he just really calmly protects against the checkmate on f1. So now if I play knight f1, he just takes it, and that endgame is winning. And again, my knight is in a zugzwang position where all of its squares are covered. So I've got to go something like, so if I go knight h5 here, d pawn is now falling. So he's now, I guess going back, when I was saying, I don't know why my opponent played knight f8, actually there is a very clear idea behind this, which is to come and get the d pawn. So that is almost certainly why my opponent played it. But maybe he missed my mate threat, and then, you know, he has to see this. He has to see this idea of just allowing me to build the mating net, and then just very calmly preventing it. And he has to see that this is winning. So yeah, really difficult to do. So here, he tries to prevent the mate another way. So he tries to prevent me from coming to the g2 square. So he plays bishop e4, and the position has now gone from totally winning to drawn. So after this, it's a draw, which is pretty crazy. But it's because the g pawn falls. So my next move, bishop e2, he now can't protect the g pawn, which is very sad and unfortunate. So king h3 would be met by bishop check, and either he comes back here for a repetition, or he comes out here, and then I can actually take this. So pawn takes, king e3, king g3, bishop e2, and this is drawn apparently. So, you know, this is another, we could go into detail examining why this is a draw. There's probably lots of exciting lines to look at here, but I don't have the time. So this is what he actually played. He goes after the d pawn, which makes sense, but believe it or not, this is now winning for white, which is so unfortunate. Like, endgames like this are so cruel. Like, I don't know, you know, it's not immediately obvious to me that this is now winning. So when I played my next move, bishop takes g5, I didn't know I was winning at this point. All I knew was I'm now putting into action my plan, which was I actually now get my dream scenario where I can go after these weak pawns. So I definitely knew I wasn't losing here, but I didn't know I was winning yet. So knight takes d4, and now he's threatening to come in here. So if I go after these pawns right away, there's no winning chances. So I have to find, well, okay, so I thought I had to find this next maneuver. Apparently I can also just actually take here, and this is winning. So let's have a look at this quickly. This is not what I played. Knight takes, pawn takes, king e3. So apparently I just give up the b pawn, bishop c8. And apparently this is winning. Yep, makes sense. Makes sense. So the king is way offside here. I'm going to pick up the b7 pawn. The knight is tied to defending these pawns, and the king is just going to walk in, and it's a win. So yeah, this was another way to win. So I went slightly more complicated way. I put the king in the corner and bring the knight here, and Wow. So this is a blunder. So my idea of knight e3 was simply to prevent knight c2. So I didn't want him to win the b pawn. We go back one move. Right. Okay. I thought knight f1 check was. I thought so. I thought what the engine was telling me in this position was that I can win by either knight f1 check or knight takes e4. Apparently, knight takes e4 is the only win, and the only reason the evaluation was also showing knight f1 check is because the engine says you repeat and then you play knight takes e4. So you can forget about that last bit that I just said. So knight takes e4 here is the only way for white to win. So I played knight e3, and yeah, here my opponent blundered again. So he can hold the balance here with either a5, which is a very good move but very difficult to play, just sacking the pawn, or he can play this. Now, I still think this is very difficult for him to defend. The evaluation here is plus 0.5. So although white is a pawn down, he's better in this ending, but plus 0.5 is probably telling us that this is not in the range of positions you can win. So if I do this, a5, takes, bishop takes c6, knight takes c5, yeah. So we are now heading very quickly towards a draw. I think it must be pretty obvious at this point that this is going to end up a draw. But that's not what happened. So, my opponent was in extreme time trouble now, and these things happen. After this, there's no way for black to save the position anymore. So basically, the plan here is dead simple for me. I am going to go down here. I'm going to keep the king in the corner as much as I can. I'm going to win the b pawn. I'm then going to come back with the bishop. And I'm either going to walk my king up here, and I can come around the back and eat the pawns, or there's an even simpler way to win, which happens in the game. So bishop comes back. King has there's nothing for him to do here. He can either shuffle the bishop, the king has to stay in the corner. It's totally miserable. King comes up, and now this is the other winning plan. This bishop is going to come to d3, and he ran out of time here. But basically what's going to happen is here, here. Now, if he moves the bishop, I take the a pawn. If he allows me to capture the bishop, then whichever way he captures, one of these pawns is going to queen. And finally, if he captures, king takes, king here, and then this move wins. So whichever way he captures, one of these pawns queens. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you say about a game like this? I was very, very lucky. I wouldn't say it was pure luck that I survived and won, because, I did what I do, which is, make as many problems for my opponent as possible. He had many chances to win. Not all of them were easy to see. Some of them easier than others. He played very well for almost the entire game, and then made two really crucial mistakes in the end game in extreme time trouble. So, really disappointing for him. Really lucky for me. To come away with a win from a position like that is just very lucky. Like at worst, maybe I save a draw there. So, just really on. I don't know. It's the kind of game after you play a game like that, you feel like apologizing, but then you can't really apologize because you're doing your best to cause a situation like this, and then you get what you want. So you can't apologize. You just have to go. Yep, that's chess. It's brutal. So yeah. So after this game, then I was on. Oh gosh, what was it? So was I on three? No, three and a half. So yeah, three and a half out of four after this. So for the final game, uh, I ended up on board one for the first time in the tournament, actually. And I was playing. So there was three of us on um, three and a half, and uh, yeah, myself and the next highest rated player under me were playing on board one, and then on board two, the other player on three and a half was playing the person that I played in round two. So yeah, this is not as long a game, so I'm going to go through this one reasonably quickly. Um, so it's an Alpen Sicilian. Um, it's not a coincidence that I keep facing the Alpen Sicilian because it's not a secret that I hate it. Because you know it's not that it's amazing for white or anything. It's just that it leads to positions that are just not very Sicilian-y. Uh, they're not as dynamic for black usually. Um, I should probably try and learn something different against it. So I played d5, which is solid main line. When I was younger, I used to play knight f6. Oops. But the problem is I don't know the theory anymore. Anything I do know is going to be 30 years old at least. I probably should learn it because it is a little bit more forcing and dynamic. These positions are probably a bit more interesting. So for now, and just play the d5 line. And yeah, so my opponent surprises me right away. My idea here, the line that I've been looking at recently, goes like this. So, this is a normal move here. I think you can also play just knight f6 here. But I've been looking at this move, bishop f5, which is quite interesting. And in some of these lines, you do an early queenside castle. So it's fine. It's not like fantastically wonderful or anything. But yeah, my opponent played knight a3, which completely throws me off that. The other line I've often played in these Alpen positions is I've tried to fianchetto my bishop, and I think this line is specifically aimed against a kingside fianchetto. So my opponent showed me something after the game where if I'd tried to go g6, now what was it he showed me? I've actually already forgotten, but there's some sharp line. I think it involved an early knight b5, and then this kind of queen move, and I think creating some knight c7 check threats. I don't remember, uh, but it's all right because I was never going to play g6 here because I kind of don't believe in that move anymore in these positions. So knight c6, knight f3, bishop f5. Probably not the best here. Um, yeah, this is probably much more normal. F5. Yeah, this is definitely inaccurate. So d4. Um, I should definitely just take this. And then I'm not sure what my opponent's plan was here. If he goes bishop c4, then I get this move, which is highly annoying. if he goes here, which is often the idea of having the knight on a3, then now I can actually just castle queenside, and I'm clearly better here, because if he goes something like this, this is highly embarrassing. So for that reason, he's got to recapture with the pawn or the knight. So if he goes the pawn, then again we have this e5 move, and black is doing completely fine here. This is quite nice. You've got these kinds of ideas. You've got castling queenside ideas. So there's no problems. I mean, it's like very tiny advantage black, let's say. So yeah, clearly I should take, and instead I played queenside castles, which gets me into a teeny bit of trouble. So bishop e3, and now I'm really forced to capture in the center now under less favorable circumstances, and I'm kind of forced into an ending. So I have to take. Queen takes, best move. I have to take because of the threat to a7. And now I have to decide what to do here. My a7 pawn is under attack. The best move here to stay within equality, according to the engine, is to play this pawn sacrifice. It's not possible to play bishop takes e5 because rook e8 wins a piece, but he can play bishop takes a7, and then I take, and here. And, white is slightly better because he has an extra pawn, but his pawn structure is really bad. So I did look at this, and I didn't think I had to play it, basically. I thought, the best I'm going to be hoping for in this kind of endgame is a draw, because white has the two bishops and an extra pawn. So I'm really only playing for a draw here. And I didn't, fancy that. And the move I did play, I thought was okay for me. So I could see that white would get some immediate threats here. But if you asked me how to evaluate this, I probably would have said, yeah, it's probably like plus 0.5. I thought white had a slight initiative. Uh, the engine says it's closer to +1. Um, so, white's position here is nearly worth a full pawn, which is quite surprising, but it's all down to, weaknesses on my queen side and the time it's going to take me to get my king side developed. So sadly, I have to play this move. Well, I thought I had to play this move to get developed. Apparently, this is playable. So yeah, g6. I would have thought this would be too slow here, actually, but the engine says this is all right. F6 seemed a little bit more. I thought the benefit of this is I get my pawn established here. I take away his d4 outpost. It's also fine, according to the engine. F4, double-edged move, I'd say. It does stop me from playing e5, but it does also, positionally, this is not such a great move for white. So we develop our pieces. Strangely enough, this very natural looking move is a mistake. What the engine wants here is for white to either castle kingside or play a4. Now, why is bishop f3 a mistake is the real question. So let's see what it wants us to play. So it wants us to play this. So we're attacking the f4 pawn. So I think the move I looked at here for white was this. Takes, bishop takes, rook d7. And this seemed slightly awkward to me. So I don't think I calculated deeply here, but what I was afraid of was basically white is going to get his king out of the way, either castle or play his king up the board. He's going to bring a rook to the center. He's going to trade this rook off, and I can't bring this other rook over because this bishop is covering the d8 square. So that was my thought process, is this looks slightly awkward to me, and it looks like white is going to have a nagging initiative that I might struggle to put out. However, the engine disagrees, so the engine just shows a sequence like this. So castles, bishop d6, g3. We're already breaking the problem of the d8 square. Bishop takes, king takes, rook d1, and now it's all zeros. So we're now dead equal. So I guess this is what you call being scared of ghosts. So likewise, if white takes this, obviously we don't take with the rook because of this knight check, so we have to play pawn takes. My pawn structure is now worse, but the compensation is I'm going to have a fantastic bishop outpost on e4. So all of the deficiencies of my position are going to be fixed by this one bishop outpost. And again, this is going to be dead equal. So yeah, I did not play that. I played knight c6, which also looked okay to me, but the engine says that now after this move, now I'm going to have the problem that I was afraid of in the other line, but I'm going to have it for real. So, you know, it's so easy to feel stupid when you look at lines with the engine. Because basically the problem here is that I now don't have this maneuver here because the knight is still on covering the d6 square. So that this would allow, it's not massive, this is still only slight advantage white, but this would have allowed my opponent to keep on playing for something. So instead of that, he captured on c6, which I kind of felt like I was out of danger here because although my pawn structure is worse now, I've got two bishops, and the light squared bishop is going to be really, really powerful. So I felt like even if I lost one of those pawns, I would have enough to comfortably draw. So we'll play through some of these moves quickly, do some trading, and we get to this position. Kind of an interesting moment. The engine wants me to just play king c6 here, so giving up the pawn. And then just play h5. Yeah, so the engine says here, we're going to push the kingside pawns. White has an extra pawn, but because of the two bishops, it's equal. So what I played, I keep the pawn on the board for one more move. Best line for white here is knight c5 check. And my plan here was I'm going to abandon the a6 pawn, and I'm going to bring my king up the board. And I thought, I'm now invading white's position, and I must have at least enough for the pawn. Now, apparently, white can still play for a win here. So b4, pawn takes, king e4, king d2, king takes f4, c4. And it is probably still going to be a draw, but with the two connected pass pawns, white is definitely the one playing for a win here. So, you know, although the evaluation here is plus 0.1, I mean, it's basically equal. If my opponent wanted to play hard for a win, this is what he should have gone for. But what happened at this moment, b3, I think I played pawn takes b3, and at this moment on the other board, so on board two, there was a repetition and they agreed a draw, and uh, since a draw on our board then would give three of us equal first, my opponent offered a draw. So he played knight c5 check here and offered a draw, and I accepted because equal first is good, and either side pressing hard for a win here is risking losing. Now, the ironic thing is that that last move, knight c5 check, is probably the worst move that either of us played in the game. So when you let the engine run a little bit here, it suddenly jumps to minus 1.4, which means that I'm very close to a win. So I think what happens is king c6, and then if he plays knight takes b3, which I presume was the intention, now the king invasion is very dangerous. So the difference with this endgame now is that these pawns are split. d2, the bishops are going to be very powerful here. So if he plays g3, yeah, look at this. The light squared bishop is just going to be a real problem here. King comes in. So yeah, this is lost. The best move here is actually, instead of taking on b3, play knight takes a6. And then if I do this, go and collect the pawn. Knight takes a2, bishop c7, g3, king c4, d2. This may be holdable. This is minus 0.6. So maybe it would end up a draw here, but black is definitely pressing here. Possibly it would be a little mean-spirited of me to, what I would have had to do. You see, I was relieved as well, right? So the board beside us drew. He offered a draw, and I was just relieved to not be worse. And I was relieved to come equal first when I felt like I didn't feel like I'd played my best this tournament. So I was kind of just really happy with the draw. And psychologically, in a circumstance like that, you're not going to sit down and think, can I really press hard for a win here? Also, the last time I played this opponent, I pressed really hard for a win in an endgame with two bishops against a bishop and a knight, and I ended up losing. So these things prey on your mind. Anyway, I took a draw. I got equal first, so three of us shared first place on 4 out of 5. And I think we were all happy. So that's the end of the story. This has been a much longer video than I intended to make. I think I probably talked too much. I guess tell me in the comments, is it good that I spend so much time analyzing these games, or would it be better if, particularly for tournament recaps like this, would it be better if I move through the games at a faster clip? I'm quite new to doing this, and when I'm sat here with a chessboard and an engine, I'm going to look at all the interesting lines. But yeah, just give me some feedback if it's not working. The next tournament that I've got coming up, I'm playing in the 4NCL Congress in Bradford. I think it's in the Cedar Court Hotel in Bradford, the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of January. I will put a link to that tournament in the description under the video, along with the link to this Bradford Congress tournament. So yeah, it's nice to have a lot of chess lined up at the start of the year, after going the whole of December without any over the board play. Also, the 4NCL tournament is FIDE rated, which is important for me. I don't get a lot of FIDE rated games, and in the few FIDE rated games that I did get towards the end of last season in Liverpool, I had a complete disaster. So my FIDE rating was kind of crushed back down to 2000. I think I'm at 2010 right now. And my ultimate goal of becoming a FIDE master, um, I would require a rating of 2300. So at the moment, that seems like unachievable. Right, but if I'm to have any chance of getting there, I've got to play FIDE rated games. So these 4 NCL tournaments are going to be important. So that's it. I'll probably do another recap after that tournament. Maybe I'll do another video in the meantime on something else. uh, if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.